Welcome back to the Introduction to Warhammer 40k 8th Edition. Today we're going to be going over the core rules of Warhammer 40k 8th Edition. So the first thing we need is our rulebook here. This is the 8th Edition rulebook. And if this is the first time you have gotten into Warhammer 40k, what you're going to find is that for the first 100 pages or so, it's mostly what we call kind of like fluffy stuff. It's the story, the background of the universe, and why we're playing the game. It's a fun read, a lot of neat illustrations. So if you got time, check it out. So one of the first things we want to do when learning the rules is we're going to check out the table of contents here. And there's quite a bit. What we're going to be looking for, of course, is the rules. And to start, we're going to turn to, looks like page 170 to check out where the rules start. So we're way back in the book just to get to the rules. So the first thing it's going to talk about is the different types of play for 8th edition. We're going to spend a different video talking about the types of play, but for now just recognize that there's something called open play, narrative play, and match play. Match play is going to be the more competitive play, the type of play that you'd see at a tournament. The next page here is all about data sheets. This is describing different units' characteristic cards. So when you look in the indexes or the codexes at the units you're trying to use, this is what you're going to see on their profile. And so this sheet in the rulebook is explaining what you're looking at. So in this case, this is the Lord of Contagion. And here's our Lord Contagion model. This is his data sheet. So it's explaining all of the different things that make this model unique. So number one here is the unit name. Again, this is the Lord of Contagion. Number two is its battlefield role. It says this is typically used when making a battle-forged army. We're going to describe what that is. So this is the battlefield role that the Lord of Contagion has. There are a variety of battlefield roles, and we'll explain what those are later. Number three is the power rating. So in this case, the Lord of Contagion is a power rating of 8. That's how powerful he is. So a weaker unit might have a lower power rating, and a tougher unit might have a higher power rating. The power rating is actually used in a certain type of gameplay for Warhammer 40k. So for match play, you're actually not going to be using the power rating there. We're going to be using the unit's points, which is different and on a different page. So we'll explain that when we get there. But for now, just know that the power rating there is typically used for building your list, your army list. Maybe you're playing a certain power level 100 or whatnot, and the Lord of Contagion's power level would be added to that when you're building your army list. Number 4 here is profiles. So this is the profile here for the Lord of Contagion. We're going to go over explicitly what profiles mean. But here, this is where you're going to find the character's movement, their weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, wounds, attacks, leadership, and save. Number 5 here is the unit's composition. So under the Lord of Contagion, you'll see it says a Lord of Contagion is a single model. So this is going to tell you how many models make up this unit. In this case, the Lord of Contagion is a single model, so he kind of goes by himself. Number 6 there is war gear. A Lord of Contagion is armed with a Plague Reaper. And if we jump to number 8, you'll see the Plague Reaper's profile. So this is the weapon that he is holding, and it will tell you the range, the type of weapon it is, the strength, its armor piercing value, and how much damage it's dealing. Now, of course, we skipped over 7 here, so let's go back. And this is the character's abilities. So this is abilities that are unique to the Lord of Contagion. So he has a few abilities here. Of course, I'm not going to spend time reading through all of them, but these are things that make the character unique. And lastly here with 9 are our keywords. These are keywords that are specific to the Lord of Contagion, but other models might have similar keywords. The purpose of having keywords is that you might have benefits that say they're associated with a specific keyword. So it might say, all infantry get some certain ability. And in this case, the Lord of Contagion has the infantry keyword. So he may benefit from whatever that ability is. Similarly, up here, he has faction keywords that are specific to Chaos and him being Nurgle, as well as Death Guard. And so there are certain abilities in the game that are going to benefit Nurgle Death Guard. So that's just a brief overview of the data sheets. So when you're building your army and picking units that you want to be a part of your army's composition, you're going to be using these types of data sheets to see what abilities they have and how they're going to perform on the tabletop. So if we turn the page, we now get into the core rules. This is the basis of how you play Warhammer 40k. And the nice thing is it's actually pretty simple. There's only a few pages. So let's jump right in. So the first thing the core rules want us to address is the idea of units. And this idea is that your army is going to be built up of units and different models will be in a unit. We looked earlier at the Lord of Contagion. He's by himself. He's a single model, but other models are going to say they come in a unit of 5, meaning 5 models. And these units need to stay in what's called coherency, which means they need to be within 2 inches apart horizontally or 6 inches vertically. So let's take a look at that. So you can see from this example, we have a unit of Space Marines and all of them are within 2 inches horizontally or 6 inches vertically. So this unit would be considered in coherency. The second unit, however, has one model that is well above 6 inches vertically from the rest of the models below. The models below are in coherency, but because that one model is well above 6 inches vertically, it is out of coherency. So now that we know about coherency and maintaining coherency with a unit, let's talk about the battle round, which are the steps each player will take during each turn. So let's take a look at what the steps are. The first, of course, is the movement phase. The next is the psychic phase. This is where you're going to have your psychers cast spells on their own units or maybe maledictions against your enemy units. We have the shooting phase, the charge phase, the fight phase, and then the morale phase. So let's start from the beginning with the movement phase. So to begin the movement phase, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick a unit to move. So in this case, if we have 2 intercessor squads, we're going to choose which unit we want to move first. So let's say we've chosen to move this intercessor squad on the right here. We need to know how far it can move. So we'll look at its profile, kind of like we showed earlier. And the first thing we're going to look at is the M on its profile. The M on its profile stands for movement, and if we look at the intercessor as well as the sergeant, it says 6 inches. So that indicates to us that the intercessors can move up to 6 inches, but they can't move beyond that. They can move less than that, but they cannot move beyond 6 inches. So to move this squad, we'll place our ruler down here, and we're going to take it to the tip of the base there, and we're going to move our intercessors up 6 inches, just like that. Now I can do this for each individual one, or to just kind of speed things up. Now that I've moved the front model, I know that these guys are just going to move up right behind it 6 inches. Now some important things to consider regarding movement here. Models cannot move through models. So in this case, if this intercessor squad wanted to move forward, they would have to go around these models here. So another important thing with regards to movement is that models cannot move through walls or buildings. So in this case, this intercessor squad could not just move through the wall like this, so 6 inches across the building, unless they had the movement to actually get atop the building and then down on the other side. Of course, they can go around it, but they can't just move straight through the building or wall. Now, one exception to this movement rule is if a character has the fly keyword. So in this case, the Hive Tyrant has the flight ability, and if a model has the flight ability, it can move over models and terrain as if it wasn't there. So in this case, the Hive Tyrant would legally be able to move over these models as well as the building and land on the other side as if they were not there. Of course, it has to be able to land and make a legal move, so it couldn't land atop of the models here, but it could land atop this building. Okay, so since we're talking about flyers, let's talk about the Hive Tyrant as an example here, and flyer movement. So one of the neat things about flyers is that they're pretty quick. They're going to be faster than your normal infantry models, but they also have some limitations in that they often have what's called a minimum movement. So as we saw with the intercessors, they had a movement of 6 inches, and it was a flat number, and they could move up to 6 inches and less than that. Well, flyers will have a maximum movement as well as a minimum movement. So let's take a look at this Hive Tyrant, and if we kind of look in at the top here, what you're going to see is there's a few movement profiles, but first off, just take a note that there is 2 numbers. One is the minimum movement and one is the maximum. So in this case, it can move a minimum of 9 inches, meaning that it must move at least 9 inches. If it falls anywhere below that, the model will be removed from the game, and then it can move up to 16 inches, so anywhere between those ranges. If it can't make the minimum move, it is removed from play. The model's just dead and gone. Similarly, if it can't make the move under 16 inches, or the maximum move, it is gone and removed from play. Now, since we're seeing a profile here with multiple numbers, I might as well just talk about this now. So what happens with some of these like character units or bigger models is they might have multiple profiles. Vehicles have this quite a bit too. So this is kind of like a damage table, and it represents the model changing its characteristics as it takes damage throughout the game. So in this case, what you'll see is that the Hive Tyrant, when it has all of its wounds, it has 10 wounds maximum. When it has 6 to 10 plus wounds, this is the top profile that it will work with. It's moving 9 to 16 inches. Its weapon skill is 2 plus, and its ballistic skill is 3 plus. We'll talk about what that means later. But as it takes on wounds, it gets weaker. So when it has 3 to 5 wounds left, it moves 7 to 12 inches. When it has 1 to 2 wounds left, it moves 5 to 8 inches. So it's slowing down as it takes damage. Now, some terminology to know for this game is that your models are considered friendly models, and that makes sense, right? So this unit of, let's say, intercessors here are friendly to this other unit of intercessors over here. And if they're moving around the table next to each other, they can kind of get as close as they want. There aren't really any limitations. However, if we have enemy models over here, of course, models that are not yours or opposing models are considered enemy and not friendly to your own. You cannot move within 1 inch of an enemy model when moving on the table. So in this case, this unit could not move any closer to the enemy unit than 1 inch. So you have to make sure there's 1 inch between the 2 units. So during the movement phase, when you pick a unit to move, you can also choose to have them advance. This allows them to cover a little extra distance during the movement phase, but it's at the sacrifice of not being able to shoot or charge during that turn. So to make an advancement, you get to make the full movement of the unit's characteristics. So in this case, these intercessors are going to move 6 inches, but the advancement is going to add on a d6 inch move. So they get a 6 inch movement plus whatever I roll on this d6. So 5 inches. So these guys would get to move a total of 11 inches during the movement phase, which might just get them up into cover. So that concludes part 2 of an introduction to Warhammer 40k 8th edition. In this part, we covered movement, unit coherency, and data sheets. Stay tuned to part 3 where we're going to talk about the psychic phase. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and if you're interested in seeing more Wolfpack Wargaming, please hit the subscribe.